Hey everybody, welcome back to the Print 3D channel. We got a couple of packages here from Repkord, and I thought we'd do a quick unboxing and a first test print of some new filaments, so stick around. Hey everybody, welcome back, and thank you for joining me here on the Print 3D channel. We got a couple of packages here from Repkord, aka Alan, and he has his own little channel over there on YouTube, and he does run a really cool 3D printing supply company, and he does have his own line of filament. And recently, in one of his Hump Day wrap-up sessions over on YouTube, one of his live streams, he has a little giveaway that he does at the end. And I happen to win one of his little RGB filament prize packs. So that's what we have here, and we're going to open this up and we're going to check out the filament inside. But before that, my wife had noticed that someone was printing with some of his Purple Haze filament that he carries, and she requested a sample of that, and that's what's in this package. And you can see she was really anxious to open it up. So we're going to check out that filament, we're going to open up both of these boxes, and we're also going to do a test print of the Purple Haze filament because I really want to see what it looks like. So let's get started. So we have the little RGB pack, and this is a special pack that you can buy from Repkord on his website, and it's basically red, green, and blue, RGB. And they're small little rolls, and it's a cool little pack to get you started with your new 3D printer, or if you just want those three colors, say you're running one of those multicolor machines, and you want some RGB colored filament. So this is perfect, and I'm really anxious to open this up because being a person who works in video, RGB is a really cool price or a really cool pack of filaments to offer. So let's open this guy up. And it's just got a little, there's a little label on the front. It's sold as is. And this is the Mini Maker PLA. And it says it's MakerBot compatible. So it sounds like it's compatible with most 3D printers. And of course, it's the RGB pack and 1.75 millimeter, which will work in both printers that we have currently in the house. The GMax 1.5 XE Plus. And the TiVo Tarantula, which we are still running test prints on, and these are the perfect size rolls to run more filament through on the Tarantula. So this is an awesome little set. So let's check this out. And it does say Repkord V line, which I'm guessing is their value line. So it's a nice budget-friendly line of filament. And I'll put all the information down in the description so you can check out his website and check out his channel over on YouTube. So let's open this up and see what's inside. And we'll put this off to the side so you guys can see this. And first off, we have a really nicely wrapped, oh, and there's a nice little separator between the filaments. Nicely wrapped roll of the blue in the pack, and it's on the clear spools, which is really awesome, so you can see how much filament you have left. And it's shrink wrapped, and it's really well shrink wrapped too, and it's in a Ziploc bag. Now that is awesome. I did not know it was coming like this, so this is a huge bonus. So you don't have to worry about storing your filament because it has a silica bag and it is in a Ziploc bag. And he's got his nice little Repkord branding on everything, even on the filament spool. So that's really cool. And it's got this really cool separator in there to keep your filament separated in there. So if something happens or something, they don't tear into each other. So that's cool. It's a good idea. And here is our green. And that looks really, really nice. Same deal here. Another Ziploc bag with the branding. And then, of course, at the bottom, we have our red. And that's a really nice color. These are really, really, really nice colors. I really like these a lot. This is going to be a really cool filaments to run through the TiVo, and I'll probably run a little bit through the GMax too, because I do like to test new filaments. And I am going to start doing more and more testing. That's basically what this very first episode here today is about, is we're going to get back into filament testing. I really want to make more time because I have a lot of samples sitting in that closet behind the camera over there of filament from a bunch of manufacturers, and I made promises that I have not kept yet. So we are going to get on that. So this is going to be a nice little start. And this is the format that we're going to do, is we're going to unbox it, and then we're going to head over to the computer and we're going to pick out a real small 1-hour print model, and we're going to print a sample of that filament, and then we're going to check it out how it looks like at the end. So that's the RGB pack from Repkord. It's a really nice packaging. I really like this setup with the Ziploc bags. I think that is super awesome. I hope all the filament, I haven't looked at the Purple Haze, I'm hoping that comes the same way. But I think that's really cool, and it came in a nice package, and it actually came in a larger box. This isn't the shipping box. You will get it in a protected box, and there's lots of packing materials inside there. So let's check out the Purple Haze package. And of course, my wife had to open it and check it out because she did request it. So this was kind of like her request. So let's check this out. This is some really good color. I really like this a lot right off the bat. I mean, this is some really cool purple. I'm a big fan of purple, obviously, and I've printed some purple stuff in the past, but I haven't found any really good purple filament that I liked enough to want to purchase it. And this is the kind of filament I would definitely purchase. This is Repkord's Purple Haze Filament. It's PLA 1.75, and its temperature on here says 220 C. So we'll do some testing when we head over to the computer and do our first test print, because we're going to start with the Purple Haze. I really want to print this because I want to see what it looks like. So let's see if there's anything else in the package. We have some stickers, and we have a business card. Awesome. Thank you, Alan. I really appreciate you sending this pack of filament for us to test here on the channel and just to kind of play with too, because that's really cool. We've got 4 rolls of filament, in my opinion. Whether they're full rolls or large rolls or rolls of any size, 4 rolls of filament's really cool. So we have some stickers here, and these will be a great addition to the sticker wall behind me. So we'll definitely put one of these up before the episode ends. So I'll set that aside. We have a couple other ones, so I'm sure my wife will want to add one to her little sticker collection. So that's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and open up the Purple Haze, and let's check out what the filament looks like. I need to get some scissors. So let me get off camera for a second. Now the Purple Haze did not come in a Ziploc bag, so I'm hoping, Repkord, Alan, that you might have those available for some of your other stuff too in the future. I have plenty of storage facilities for all my filament. I keep all of mine in sealed containers with at least a dozen silica bags down in the bottom of the container, so I'm never worried about my filament drying out. Plus I live in Las Vegas, so that's really not an issue. It has been raining a lot lately, but I don't think that's going to affect my filament since it's all stored properly. But it didn't come in a Ziploc, whereas the smaller rolls did. So hopefully they'll start doing Ziplocs on the larger bags, or on the larger rolls of filament. So we'll take that aside. Oh wow, you can really see that. I mean, that looks really, really cool. That is a really brilliant purple. I like the color name too, Purple Haze. It's Jimi Hendrix, of course. And I like the spool because it does have the holes, even though it's a clear spool, it does have holes in the side so you can see the filament, which is really, really nice. It does have the spool or the strand end holders in 4 positions all the way around, which is awesome. That's really, really cool. I've gotten so many rolls of filament that have them in one position, and you end up wasting, I don't know, a gram of filament, who knows, maybe less, but you still end up wasting a lot of filament trying to get to that, and it's nice to have it in 4 different positions. So let's take some of the filament off of here, and let's give it a couple of little cuts. I have my cutters here. Let's try not to unspool it too much. I can say too that it's very nicely wound on the spool holder itself, so that's really good. And I have my cutters here, so let's give it a cut and see how soft it is. We'll do a nice little angled cut. Oh yeah, that's a really good filament. I can tell right away that no moisture, and it's not dried out weirdness. There's nothing going on because it was a very smooth cut. Let's do the bend test. See if you guys can see that. Oh yeah, that's taking some effort to snap off. That's awesome. Those are 2 good signs right off the bat that this is some good filament. So let's go ahead and wind this back up, back on the spool holder. And since you have 4 locations to choose from, you won't be wasting too much filament. And that's another test too, when I get that filament back on here, if it doesn't snap when you're rolling it through that little hole, that's always a good test. So all in all, right off the bat, I'm pretty happy with what I see here. We've got 3 different colors from the RGB pack from the standard set, and we do have some of this cool Purple Haze filament. So let's head over to the computer and let's pick out a model. I already have one in mind. And let's pick out a model and let's run it through Simplify 3D, and then we'll head over to the GMax and we'll get this printing. All right, folks, so here we are over at the Mac. Let's go ahead and head over to Thingiverse, and I'll show you the model we've decided to use as our first test print with the Purple Haze filament from Repkord. Okay, so here we are at Thingiverse. This is the Buddy model, which is Josef Prusa's little dog. And it is a model that's actually preloaded on the SD card when you get your Prusa printer. But somebody over at Thingiverse decided to hijack it and stick it up on Thingiverse. And it's been up here since 2016, so I'm guessing it's not that big of an issue. It's actually licensed under Creative Commons, so we're going to go ahead and download this, and we're going to drag it over into Simplify 3D, and this is the model we're going to use as our test print. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's head over to Simplify 3D, and here we are in Simplify 3D, and I have a fresh unused document. This is not a factory file, and I'll go ahead and grab Buddy, the STL file, and drag it over. And there's little Buddy. And he's a cute little dog. I wonder if this is a 3D scan or somebody modeled it. I'm really not sure about that. So let's go ahead and add our process setting, and we are using the GMax printer. And here's some of my basic settings. Here's my retraction settings. I'm using 1mm retraction distance. I'm using a vertical lift of 1.2 millimeters to pull the extruder off the model every time it changes layers or anytime it needs to do retraction. And my retraction speed's pretty low. Under layer height, we're going to do a 0.16 millimeter layer height with 3 top layers, 3 bottom layers, and 3 perimeters. Our first layer is going to be set at 110% on the height and the width, and my first layer speed is going to be 70%. I've also picked out my start point where I want my extruder head to start and my first layers and all layers afterwards, which creates a seam, and that's at 300 by 350 on my print bed. We're also going to run a bit of a skirt, and this is where most people go, what? Why do you need 10 outlines? Well, I like to make sure my extruder is really primed and ready, and this also gives me a chance to use baby step Z to bring the extruder down closer to the print bed should it not be perfectly level. Even though I have a BL Touch, I do have an acrylic bed, and there are inconsistencies in the acrylic, especially after printing for 252 days. On infill, we're going to use 10% on this little model. We're not going to generate any support material. For temperature, this is Repkord's filament, and the filament suggests on the label that the temperature be 220 degrees. So let's go ahead and set our first layer temperature for 220, and then let's back it down 5 degrees to 215. Whoop, 2015, that's way too much. 215 for our third layer, and we'll see from there how the temperature goes. Normally in this situation, I would probably should run a temperature test, but I have confidence that Repkord has sent us filament that he's tested before with temperatures he knows works, and I like to run mine just a little cooler because I do have a silicone sock on my E3D hot end, which contains all the heat, so I don't have any heat creep whatsoever. So we'll try 215, and if it looks like there's an issue, I can always dial the temperature up during the print. Under cooling, I have my 3-stage cooling system set up, which is my standard system for cooling. I do have this set up to increase the fan speed to 100% if layers are below 9 seconds, which really is being canceled out by layer 6's fan speed going up to 100%, but I've just left it in there. Under G-code, this is the stock settings that I've downloaded from G-Create. Same with the scripts. Under speed, we're going to run this out at 35 millimeters per second for the main speed for printing. The outline under speed, which is the speed that the perimeter prints at, will be 70% of 35 millimeters per second, and any infills will be 80% of 35 millimeters per second. And if you're a math whiz, that'll be fun to figure out. In the other tab, we're not using any of the new bridge settings because there's no bridging being done. And under advanced settings, I'm not going to use any of the gap fill advancements under the thin wall behavior. I'm just going to use my standard settings. I am actually going to hit update profile, so we can hit, because this is for Repkord's filament. And as you can see, I just normally make a few changes, and I leave everything the same, and I just update the profile from model to model. So let's go ahead and hit OK, and let's hit prepare to print, and see how this little guy slices. So we have an hour and 14 minutes print time, which isn't too bad. It's only going to use 13 grams of material, and the cost is nominal because we don't have our cost entered in. And this filament was provided for free by Repkord just for fun testing, just to have some filament. I'm not being paid for this in any way, just so you guys are clear with that. So let's go ahead and play this through and see how it prints. I don't see any reason to have any support material. I don't see any overhangs being generated at this point. And it looks like there's going to be a little bit of extra material. The little green squigglies usually is the extra material, but other than that, I think this is a pretty easy print. I don't see, let's go ahead and watch the back side of the dog. Let's play this through one more time, make sure there's no weirdness in the back. And of course our seam's probably going to be somewhere right around here, so that'll be good. I think it's actually going to be right there. So this looks like a pretty easy slice. So let's go ahead and save this off to the SD card. and then we'll head over to the GMax and we'll start printing, and I'll show you how I set up a print. Okay, so we have Buddy, the dog model, loaded up on our SD card. There's a couple of things we need to do before we start printing with the Repkord Purple Haze Filament, so you guys can bear with me while I do these. I wanted to show you guys what it's like for me to start a print every time I print on the GMax. There are a couple of steps I go through. Obviously, we have to clean out the filament that was in there previously. I don't have any more DynaClean, Clean purge thingies left. So basically, I just use a couple of purges, so you'll have to bear with me while we do a couple of purges through the system. But we're also going to sand the acrylic, because I do that every single time, wet sand the acrylic. And then we'll get the print started, and we'll go from there. So here's our SD card, so we'll go ahead and load that up in the GMax. And we'll go ahead and power it up. GMax is running. The BL Touch does a quick sensor test, self-test, and make sure everything is good. It does a couple of clicks up and down, and then it's set to go. The red light is supposed to be on. So we'll slide the bed forward, and I have some water here, and we're going to do a quick wet sand on the board before we start a print, because I did print something last night, and there's some remnants from that print on the board. And I just have a quick sanding sponge here. And this is actually suggested by Gordon over at GCreate, and bear with me, this might be a little bit loud because I'm sanding, but Gordon suggested doing this when I first got my GMax. It's something he has in his videos about setting up your GMax when you first start printing, and they're really great videos, and I'll put those down in the description so you guys can check those out if you're a GMax owner, or if you just want to watch some really cool videos, because GCreate does produce some really good content. So basically what you need to do is just lightly wet sand and make sure that your board is clean. And this will take care of any PLA that's left over on the board too. Now, I usually go on the outside a couple of light turns and then in the inside, because that's where I do most of my printing. And I'm not applying any pressure, I'm not pushing down, I'm just kind of rubbing it. So I'm basically just wet sanding off the dirt and grease and everything that's on there. And then once that's done, I just take a cotton shirt that I've been using and I just wipe off the water. So that basically gives us a nice clean surface, and I won't touch this now until the print is done. And usually I try not to touch the board at all because I don't want to get any grease on it, because the grease has a tendency to penetrate on acrylic surfaces, so it will leave marks. And I do have where I set up my time-lapse camera, which is right here in this corner here, and there's a little bit of adhesive glue here because I use basically this actually came with the action camera. It was how it was sitting in the packaging. And I basically set it here with a couple of bulldog clips, and that's how I film my time lapse. Or I use the iPad if it's going to be a vase print, and I set it up over here. But either way, the board, in my opinion, is ready to go. So I'll just set this aside. We do have our filament right here on the spool holder that Chris Russell over at Practical Printing and I did as a collaboration. And this is a really cool spool holder. And if you want to see that video, I'll put a link right up here in the description to part 1, which is where Chris and I discuss how we're, the building of this and his work in Fusion 360. It's a really good video. You should really check it out. But anyway, we're going to use that spool holder because, or this spool holder, because the GMax has an overhead spool system using gravity feed. And this one's a little bit narrow, and it's not that I'm paranoid and it won't work. I just want you guys to be able to see the spool in the camera, and so you guys can see everything. Plus, I really want to try this out, and I know it'll work. What we're going to have to do, though, is once I load up the filament on the spool holder, that's going to go off camera behind the printer, because we have the main cable ties, or the main cable system here coming down to the extruder head, and I don't want to put the filament going in this way. I'd rather have it coming in around the back, and that's perfect for this little application with the spool holder that we have. So let's go ahead and purge out. I should have been doing that while we were talking. Let's go ahead and purge out the old filament that's in the extruder. And what I like to do is just gently put my wires here up out of the way so I can access my extruder. And then I'll go into the commands by pushing on the button. I'll go down to prepare, and I'll scroll all the way down to purge ABS. And the reason why I'm doing that is it sets its temperature, the default temperature set up by the GCreate team for the GMax on this particular Marlin firmware is 220 degrees. And that's exactly what the filament is that RepWrap's filament suggests, is 220 degrees, which is also going to be our first layer, our first 2 layers. As you remember, in Simplify 3D, we set that up. So while this is heating up, I'm going to go ahead and get this filament ready. And I think I already did cut this on an angle, but I'm going to do another cut on a nice little angle so we get a point, because it makes it easier to feed into the direct drive system that's on the GMax. So right now we're at 115 degrees and climbing pretty quick. And I'm really anxious to get this started because I'm really anxious to see what this Purple Haze filament looks like. I have a feeling it's got a little bit of a translucent aspect to it, but I think that just might be the way it's catching the light. So we'll see when it prints. And once the extruder is once we're all set up with our print, basically what I'm going to do is we'll finish up. I'll show you guys me setting up that first print. I'm actually going to stand up and I'm going to move the camera a little bit closer so you guys can see this. I'm kind of doing this live, but not a live stream. And you guys will be able to see that first layer going down. And then I will set up the time-lapse camera. And then I'm going to take a little break while this prints. And I'll probably grab some footage while it prints to add to the video. And maybe some stills too to put up on social media. And then once the print's finished, we'll come back and we'll talk about the color and the print quality and all those other things. And if we need to change our temperatures, of course, too, because we are running a little bit hotter than I like to run my PLA. But that's suggested because I think that's probably best for this kind of filament, because like I said, it does have a little bit of a translucent aspect to it. So we're at 220 degrees, so that didn't take too long. That was about a minute, maybe a minute and a half to warm up the extruder from room temperature all the way up to 220 degrees. And I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but it is extruding out filament for the purge. So once that's done, I will remove this filament, we'll feed in some of the Purple Haze, and then we'll do another purge to prime the nozzle and remove any of the remaining brown filament that's in there, because that's the filament I had left over from the last print that I did. So this should be done any second. And there it is. So we'll just take this and we'll set it aside. And the easiest way to remove filament, and this is the way I do it, I'm sure if I'm doing it wrong, you guys will tell me in the comments, but I just release the spring and I pull the filament out. It's 220 degrees, it's really hot right now, so, and once I do another purge, that should really release any filament that's stuck in there, so I'm not too worried about any remaining filament. And since this is a direct drive system, it's going to be pushing the filament directly into the system. It's not going through a Bowden tube, so there's not going to be any back pressure. And what I do is I push a little bit of filament through, just to make sure, just to get some of that feeding through. So we have a little bit of leftover brown. You can see a little bit of that purple coming through. So we're going to move the filament spool holder to the back and make sure it is feeding properly. Whoa! That's what you get when you do things live. Let's do from the top. All right, so bear with me here when I get this set up properly. I think that will work. Yeah, I think it's a direct drive system, so I'm not too worried. And I think it'll pull. Plus, I'll be watching it through the first few layers just to make sure it's pulling properly off the filament holder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut the GMax off, because I found that the Marlin software doesn't allow you to do a secondary purge while it's still on, or at least that's what I've discovered lately. So I'm just turning it off. It's still at 218. I'm going down to prepare, and I'm going to hit purge ABS, and it should purge pretty quickly because it's still sitting at 212. It does cool off pretty quick. We do have the AC on, believe it or not, and it is pretty nice out today. But I like to keep the AC on because when I'm shooting stuff here, I have a whole bunch of lights on. Plus the computer's running, and the GMax, which has a hot end that's up to 220 degrees. So that will add a little bit of residual heat into the room. So anyway, it's already reached optimum temperature. Let me pull some of these goobers off. And we should be seeing some of the purple haze coming out. Yep, I can see it. Let's see how this spool thing is going to work over here. We'll keep an eye on that and make sure everything goes okay. I don't want any problems with the spool feeding filament in, because that'll cause a problem during the print. And it's all purple. I don't see any remnants of the brown. It's a really nice color too. So when this finishes here, yeah, it's a little hot, but it is somewhat translucent. Actually, when I'm holding it up to the light behind the camera there, I can actually see the glint of the translucentness. So this is going to be some really cool filament. So right now what we need to do is, it's very stringy at 220 degrees, so keep an eye on that too. But we're going to drop our temperature down to 215 on this third layer. So I'm going to shut the printer off one more time. I'm going to turn it back on again, and I'm going to allow it to cool down just a little bit. And the reason why I'm doing that, and I'll talk to you for a few seconds here while it cools down before we start the print and I move the camera over is I have an acrylic board, and if it starts doing the BL touches probing on the board, it does 9 areas on the board. And even though I do have a silicone sock on the hot end, I don't want any heat creep causing any melting of the acrylic. So I've started prints at about 140, between 140 and 150, and I haven't noticed any issues. The big issue is it's going to come down directly into the middle twice. It'll come down and do its initial touch, it'll come and do 3 on this end, and then 3 more down the middle. So it does go into the center twice, and I don't want to have any heat from the extruder warping my acrylic board, because we are 252 days into the 365 project, and I don't really want to have to replace the acrylic board. So I'm going to throw this garbage away. It's about 180, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the camera real quick, and I'm going to set it up again, and we're going to start the print. Okay, so the printer has cooled down a little bit. We've got the camera reset up. I've moved the spool holder over into the back behind the GMax, and I've got everything set up. I think we're good to go here. So let's go ahead and start our print. I'm going to go down to print from SD card, and we're going to select buddy.g code, and there we go. So basically what's going to happen now is the GMax is going to probe in 9 areas. It's actually going to probe into the center first, which is the home position of this particular setup on the Marlin. And then it's going to go around and do its 9 probes. Whoop. Should have saw that one coming. Because it's got such a huge print bed, sometimes, well, not sometimes, you have to make sure that you have enough room around your printer for the print bed to do its thing. Now, once it starts printing in the middle of the board, we'll be able to move our spool holder back. So that was kind of a cool snafu you guys got to see on camera. And I hope you guys can see me, right? Either way, this is what's called a kind of a live recording of a first print. So at least you get to hear my voice while this goes through its motions. Now the BL touch is done with the front section. Now it's going to move back to the back part of the print bed. I'll make sure I stay out of the way and don't interfere with this. And you don't really want to touch the board while it's doing this, because you could cause a incorrect measurement to be taken by the BL touch. So it's very important that you just let the printer do its thing while it's doing its BL touch readings. And normally, right at this point here, I would normally set up my time-lapse camera, and my time-lapse camera goes right here. And I showed you guys earlier that I just used the little plastic and a couple of bulldog clips, and I just plug in my action camera to an extension cord and I let it sit right here. But I'm going to let the first couple of layers print here on camera so you guys can see what it looks like coming out of the GMax for the first time with the Purple Haze Filament from Repkord. So right now the extruder's at 125 degrees and climbing, so we should be good to go here in a couple of seconds. I have my tweezers ready to grab any scraps of filament that may leak out, because 220 degrees is actually a pretty high temperature, in my opinion, for PLA. But it's probably an accurate temperature for translucent type filament, so I'm sure this is fine. And we are still recording, aren't we? Yeah, we're still recording. So we're at 180 degrees, so I don't see any filament leaching out just yet. I'm just going to make sure my silicone sock is in place, and I do this every time I start a print, because there are some nuts and bolts that are sticking out on the E3D's heater block down there that the sock doesn't really make enough room for. So we're at 212 degrees, and I'm starting to see a little bit of filament leaching out, which is good. That means the extruder seems to be primed and ready. We're at 217, 218. And one of the things I like to do with my GMax printer, even though I have a BL touch, is I like to get ready with the baby step Z function so I can tune that very first layer. And that's exactly why I also use 10 outlines on my skirt. I'm going to pull this little piece off here. It seems like it's flowing pretty good. Let's go ahead and go to baby step Z so I'm ready just in case. It is somewhat translucent. We are getting a very good first layer here. I think we're okay. I may move it up just a skosh. So I moved up the baby step Z 2 turns clockwise, which raises the extruder on this particular controller. So, and I'm just going to watch that first layer's skirt go down. And this is another reason why I do 10 10 times around, 10 lines of the skirt, is to make sure that our first layer is perfect. So if your skirt is going good, then your first layer should go good too. So, and plus it gives a chance for the extruder to get really, really primed. Depending on the type of filament, say you're using some sort of composite, you probably want that filament really to be somewhat liquefied and moving at a certain consistent rate. And this is a good way to get it started. So just something to think about. I know it wastes a tiny bit of plastic, but so little that you probably wouldn't notice it any different compared to how much people use support material that's no longer usable filament. So this is a good test. And I think it's done with its last lap here, and it should start building on the model. There it goes. So we're going to go ahead and start building the first layer of the Buddy the Print model using the Repkord Purple Haze Filament. And it looks like it's going pretty good. I don't see any problems yet. It is definitely translucent, and that's one of the things using a clear acrylic or no build tack, is it's really hard to see the translucent filament on those first few layers. So here's another thing too, with the seam being at 300 by 350 millimeters, it's always going to start printing, or most of the time it will start printing in the back of the model moving forward. So you can actually, you can look down, because the GMax has a lot of stuff going on around the extruder. So you really have to kind of look to see that first layer going down perfectly. If you have any problems and you need to move your baby step up or stop the print because it's scraping the board. So you really want to get down there and look. So when it's coming directly towards you, that makes it a lot easier to see it. When it's moving away from you, sometimes you won't be able to see if it starts to drift. So it looks like it's finishing up here on the first layer. And there's layer 1 is done, and now we're on to layer 2. And the filament's flowing really good. We'll see later on if there's any stringing problems or if the temperature is an issue. But right now it's holding steady at 220 degrees on the GMax, not a problem there. When we get to layer 2, it's going to drop down to 215 degrees, and hopefully that still will be a nominal temperature to print this type of PLA. So we will see here in a couple of seconds, and we're just going to sit here for a couple of seconds and let that third layer get going and watch the temperature drop. And make sure there's no clicking or skipping or any problems. It looks like the filament is feeding okay off of this little filament holder. I should probably put this on a high shelf. That would probably be better. So I'll keep an eye on it, but it's not getting in the way of the extruder arm or the print's movements, the printer's movement, so it's okay for now. But I'll be keeping an eye on it during the time-lapse footage. So we're on to layer 3. And the temperature is slowly dropping down to 215 degrees on the GMax. And the filament looks awesome. I'll take some pictures while the time lapse is running so we have some other shots of it while it's printing. But so far so good. Everything looks good. It's a very cool purple. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the time-lapse camera, and once this is done, we'll talk about the print and we'll wrap up today's episode. So I'll see you guys on the other side. Okay folks, so that print is done. The GMax is behind me, still cooling off a little bit. I just pulled the print buddy, the little dog from Josef Prusa, off the print bed, and we're going to talk about that. The filament is really awesome. It printed perfectly. There were no problems whatsoever. There's like one little tiny string there between his legs there at the bottom near where the print started. But other than that, this is like a perfect print. And this filament is awesome. It reminds me of like a Jolly Rancher candy. It really does look like a piece of candy. I really want to eat it. But it is filament, so I'm not going to eat it obviously. But the print quality on that little guy at 0.16 millimeter layer height on the GMax 1.5 XT Plus is amazing. This guy turned out perfect. This is an awesome print, and I really love this filament. Repkord, this is some great filament. This is the Purple Haze, And I know you have a whole bunch of other colors, and I'm really anxious to try a whole bunch more now. But what we're going to do now is we're going to do some more testing with the Purple Haze filament, and then we'll probably use some of the RGB filament for the TiVo for its test prints, because those are some really nice small rolls and they work really good on the TiVo, which didn't come with a spool holder. But Chris and I over at Practical Printing, like I mentioned earlier, we came up with the spool holder, and I actually just used this on the GMax. Oh, the GMax is done cooling off, and I used this for this print and it worked perfectly, and I didn't have any problems with it whatsoever. So like I said, you can check out Chris's video, part 1, where he designs this the spool holder in Fusion 360. But other than that, I'm really happy with this very first print. This is a very, very cool filament. It's probably one of my new favorite colors. I'm definitely going to do some sort of vase print and maybe a couple of really cool models that might require a little bit of support material just to see how those look. But definitely a vase print. This is going to look awesome in a nice gMaxSize vase. So for right now, that kind of wraps up this very first unboxing and first print of Repkord's Purple Haze filament, and you guys got to see what's in the RGB pack, which if you attend his live stream, the Hump Day Rep Wrap-Up every Wednesday on YouTube, at the end he does a little giveaway, and this is one of the things he likes to give away, and it's a really cool prize pack. And again, thank you, Alan Repkord, for supplying the Purple Haze filament. You gave us that roll at no charge. We're not being paid for any kind of review or unboxing whatsoever. This is done just for review purposes only. We're not being compensated. And the RGB pack obviously was just something I won in the giveaway. So thanks, Alan, for that. That was really awesome. I normally don't enter those kind of giveaways. I want to give them to the people who really need the filament, but I've been dying to try your filament, so this was a good way to get it. So thanks again. So for now, we're going to wrap up today's episode, and I will see you guys when we do the full review on the Purple Haze filament. That'll be a separate review because I really want to review this filament because it's really, really awesome. But our very first print, Buddy, the Joseph Prusa dog, turned out perfect, and I am super, super happy with the results. This is some awesome, awesome filament, and I will see you guys in the review. Thanks for sticking around. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, comment, like, and share those videos, and we'll talk on the review.